Now, from Atlanta News First, the issues that matter to you. This is On the Record.
Good Sunday morning, everyone. 2026 is finally here. Thank you for joining us for this special edition of On the Record. I'm Doug Reardon.
And I'm Rick Fulbaum. Georgia's political landscape will look dramatically different over the course of the next 12 months, including right here in the capital city. This year marks the end of Governor Brian Kemp's time in office. His 2 terms likely to be defined by conservative policies that led to strong economic growth, and for his role in upholding Georgia's 2020 election results despite immense pressure from President Donald Trump. The race to elect his successor is crowded with a dozen declared candidates, including 7 Democrats who are hoping to turn the governor's mansion blue for the first time since Roy Barnes left office in 2003.
And now Governor Kemp still has one last legislative session to oversee before he leaves office. State lawmakers will head back to the Capitol in January with a very long list of priorities that includes creating a support system for kids who are aging out of foster care. Lawmakers plan to file legislation aimed at strengthening housing stability and helping to create educational continuity and workforce readiness. Lawmakers are also expected to debate whether to expand access to medical marijuana treatments here in Georgia. It's currently allowed for 17 chronic conditions, including late-stage cancer, Alzheimer's, and PTSD. Some doctors want lawmakers, though, to consider expanding the list of conditions. Others caution lawmakers to be thoughtful about expanding access to marijuana in any form.
There's so many people who are not in stage, but they can benefit from these medications.
I do have compassion for the people who are getting benefits from marijuana. I also have compassion for toddlers who are being hospitalized for THC poisoning, for youth with cannabis-induced psychosis.
And also front and center in the new legislative year, lawmakers in the state Senate are weighing the possibility of eliminating Georgia's state income tax altogether. Right now, income taxes bring in about $20 billion. That's more than half of Georgia's general fund. A State Budget and Policy Institute report says if Georgia eliminated income tax, lawmakers would need to implement a 12% sales tax to keep up. The local taxes included, the average sales tax rate across the state would increase 15.4%.
As state lawmakers gather under the Gold Dome, the 2026 midterm elections will come into focus, with Democrats hoping to win enough seats across the country to retake control of the U.S. House of Representatives. A tougher climb will be in the U.S. Senate, where the GOP currently holds the majority with 53 seats to the Democrats' 47. Republicans are hoping to build on that majority by picking up some Senate seats, and one of their biggest targets is right here in Georgia, where Democratic Senator Jon Ossoff is defending his seat for the first time. Ossoff was elected in 2021 and is the only Democratic senator up for re-election in a state that Donald Trump won in 2024. In the U.S. House of Representatives, Republicans are fighting to keep the majority and maybe even grow it from the current razor-thin margin they enjoy now. But it'll first shrink when Congresswoman Marjorie Taylor Greene leaves office. The Rome Republican was first elected in 2020 and made a name for herself nationally as one of President Trump's biggest and loudest cheerleaders. But after challenging party leaders and the president on issues like Obamacare subsidies and the Epstein files, President Trump started calling her a traitor and encouraged other Republicans to run against her. Greene said she was stepping down to spare her constituents a nasty primary battle.
And I do not want my sweet district to have to endure a hurtful and hateful primary against me by the president that we all fought for. I'll be resigning from office with my last day being January 5th, 2026.
And once Congresswoman Greene's resignation takes effect, it falls on Governor Kemp to call for a special election to fill her seat. Whoever wins that race will then have to run again just a few months later, first in the primaries and then in the November midterms.
A political science professor and Atlanta News First political analyst, Dr. Ben Taylor, joins us on the record. And so, Ben, Marjorie Taylor Greene, for the better part of really a decade, carried the mantle for the MAGA movement in the 14th district. What exactly does her resignation, her feud with President Donald Trump, and all of what's happened between them signal for the MAGA movement and the Republican Party?
Well, that's a great question. And I think what this really shows us is that the future of MAGA is really up for grabs. President Trump is term limited. He's a lame duck. And I think you've seen future former Representative Taylor Greene, as well as other sort of leading lights in the Republican Party, try to make a claim for what the future looks like. And none of them really sort of carry the same mantle in that way that President Trump does or has for the for the last decade. I mean, this is a really unique situation, particularly for Republicans, because they've just never, in our living experience as Americans, there's not been a Republican presidential candidate or president who's sort of, beyond Ronald Reagan, who sort of created sort of this sort of long-term allegiance in a sense. But Reagan had a really thoughtful and robust sort of intellectual framework that they built Reaganism around and the Reagan movement. The Trump administration, President Trump himself, MAGA, is really a bunch of different things, right? You've got isolationist foreign policy, protectionist economic policy. There's people who want just a tighter immigration policy system. There are people who want no immigration. And all of those are very different. You've got social conservatives, cultural conservatives, and economic conservatives all trying to figure out who is going to take the lead on leading the MAGA movement. And I don't think there's really a good sort of point person for that yet. Perhaps that will come out after the midterms. But I think what you're really seeing is that infighting happening in real time.
And if there's one thing you can say about the 14th district, it is certainly it votes red. Green won many of these elections by double digits, primaries and generals. And so, you know, there are Democrats running for her seat, of course. Do you think they can win, or is that just kind of a pipe dream?
It's in Georgia's congressional districts are exceedingly non-competitive in the general election. The legislature drew these districts several times in the last decade, and they're gerrymandered quite significantly to favor one party over the other. The real fight in all of these districts really is in the primary process, and so I would expect that the special election in the 14th, and then whoever wins that may go on to want to run for the general themselves, and so then they'll have another primary fight. That's going to be where the real action is. However, because it's a midterm election, there's always the chance that you could get sort of this big wave that carries some district that you don't normally expect. My personal opinion is that that's probably not the Georgia 14th district. I think Republicans can feel pretty safe about keeping that one on the Republican side.
Nationally, Democrats are hoping for that wave that you just mentioned. And historically speaking, the party in power loses seats in the midterm elections. So were the Democrats to be able to take over the majority in the House of Representatives, what would the final 2 years of President Trump's presidency look like?
Well, I got another great question. And what's funny about President Trump being the second term is that we've seen this before, actually. In 2018, Democrats won massive victories across the country, big wave election. And what you saw was before, when you had a Republican majority with the Trump administration, you basically saw rubber stamping of what the Trump administration wanted to do, which is what you typically see when you have unified government, particularly in the House. But when Democrats took power in 2019, under Speaker Pelosi, they held a much harder line. They were able to get policy gains and make the Trump administration and the Republicans in the Senate, which compromise. And so I would expect to see that.
Jon Ossoff is going to be defending his seat for the first time. He's the first Democrat to win that seat, that office in quite some time. Is he helped at all by the fact that his first re-election campaign falls during a midterm election when there's a Republican in the White House?
Oh, absolutely. Yes. I think Jon Ossoff is in a much better position today with a Republican in the White House than on Earth 2, where you have a Democrat in the White House now. And so I think the Ossoff campaign, though it needs to be very strategic, Georgia is a very closely divided state. Republicans still, at this moment, hold all statewide elective offices outside of a couple of now PSC seats and now the 2 Senate seats. And there's a reason for that, right? Republicans have a very extensive grassroots in Georgia in terms of get out the vote measures and things like that. However, if you look at the demographics of voters who have been trending Democratic, it's exactly the kind of voters that come out in midterm elections, particularly in states like Georgia, where their economic levels and things of that nature, education levels are very important. The suburbs are trending blue, educated voters are trending blue, whereas historically, college-educated voters in the suburbs were very strong Republican voters. That's less and less the case, particularly since President Trump has come on the scene. And I think Jon Ossoff can probably benefit from all of that. Plus, being in a Republican midterm, things are better than if it was a Democratic midterm. But the bottom line is the Ossoff campaign needs to focus on get out the vote efforts, making sure they have a tight message, and they really want to tie whoever the Republican nominee is directly to President Trump, because President Trump is not very popular right now.
Right, and we know at least one of those gubernatorial candidates, Burt Jones, is very close to Trump. He's already endorsed him, in fact, in that race. But there are a lot of Democrats running. There are a lot of people who think are strong candidates from the Democratic side for this. Could this be the year that Democrats break this decades-long streak in the governor's mansion?
You know, for the Democrats, hope springs eternal. And so I think their thinking, again, is, you know, you have to be strategic. You need a candidate at the state level who is going to mobilize the base. You need a candidate who's going to be able to win over those moderate and independent, college-educated suburban voters who have historically voted Republican but are now trending Democratic. That is a tough needle to thread because what you're trying to do is you're trying to decrease the margins in rural areas if you're the Democrat and boost margins in urban areas, and then try to win Cobb County, Gwinnett County, South Atlanta suburban counties that historically have been more Republican and now trending Democratic. That's what you're trying to do. And so several Democratic candidates have that opportunity. Who has the right message? Who has the right field operation? Who can raise the money to compete? Those are the big questions. And that's why we have primaries, so they get to fight it out amongst themselves.
Dr. Ben Taylor, thank you so much. We appreciate it. Straight ahead on the record, leaders in the city of Atlanta gearing up for a very busy 2026. We'll have a preview next. 2026 will bring big changes to Atlanta.
And leaders in our city have lofty goals when it comes to housing, transit, and economic development. And look who it is. Atlanta News First senior reporter Patrick Quinn is with us. You are down at City Hall all the time. And of course, we have a lot going on this year. Before we get into some of the top issues of 2026, how will things really be changing down at City Hall?
Well, first, thanks for letting me be here with you guys. You guys do such a good job. I'm huge fans, obviously. Okay, City Hall 2026. Can I even say that? I don't know. Y'all do a great job. Right. So top leadership, Mayor Dickens, he's back in for another 4 years. He just rolled into re-election, got big numbers. Clearly, he's going to carry that into 2026. The council will look a little bit different. A lot of similar faces. Marcy Collier Overstreet, she was just elected as the council president. She has been a council member in the past. Something to watch for in 26 is the relationship between her and Mayor Dickens. She's going to be in charge of the legislative branch of the city. Mayor Dickens obviously in charge of the executive branch of the city. Of course, we all want to see a very transparent and accountable city council and a mayor's office that work independently, but also maybe work together at times as well. Some criticism that we've heard for Marcy Collier Overstreet is she could just rubber stamp a lot of the policies pushed by Mayor Dickens.
Let's talk about Mayor Dickens for a second, because his administration was really pushing for getting something passed before the end of the year. It didn't happen. They kind of pulled the brakes on it. But this is a revitalized community initiative, $5 billion. What was it? Why did it go away? And is it going to come back in the new year?
This is the Neighborhoods Initiative. It's a $5.5 billion plan. It would really help revitalize communities in South and West Atlanta. It will bring in grocery stores. It'll bring in hospitals. It'll bring in transportation, a lot more housing. The goal is to focus on areas of Atlanta right now that are underserved and to build them up. But to do that, Atlanta needs help from Fulton County and from Atlanta Public Schools to sign off on tax revenue that would go to those two entities, but instead those two entities would say, you know what, Atlanta, you can have our revenue for the next 25 to 30 years. And that's how they would fund these initiatives. And in fact, I was able to talk with the mayor's chief of staff, Courtney English, about this Neighborhoods Initiative, $5.5 billion. Y'all stopped it momentarily. I asked him, does that mean there isn't the support needed to actually get it passed? Take a listen.
No, I think, look, folks want to take more time to get it right. We want to get it right. And so we want to go through a process that is transparent, that answers everyone's questions. This is a decision that will impact the next 30 years of the city of Atlanta. But it's a critical decision because we're dealing with 100 years of inequity, 100 years of some neighborhoods in this city that have gone without. And neighbors and people who have lived in those neighborhoods have been asking for development. They've been asking for access to jobs. They've been asking for access to transit. And so we're trying to deliver on that promise.
And just a reminder about this neighborhood initiative, once the city council approves it, then the Atlanta School Board has to approve it and Fulton County Board of Commissioners has to approve it. So a lot more that we have to get through before any of these dollars actually get invested into these communities.
There's always something for sports fans in Atlanta, too. And so, we couldn't not talk about the FIFA World Cup, which is coming next year. Thousands of visitors all across the globe are expected to descend on Atlanta. They're going to use our businesses. They're going to travel on our transit. Is the city ready for this? I know Spain is coming. That is a huge draw, obviously. And so, can we, I think everyone knows we can handle big sporting events, but are we ready for this one in particular?
I think time will tell. Atlanta
You
doesn't have a
say
choice.
yes.
Yeah. The consensus is Atlanta and their leadership right now, from everyone that I've talked to, they're leaning on that experience. They're leaning on, we've hosted the Olympics, we've hosted Super Bowls, we've hosted college football, huge games year after year. We know how to put on big sporting events. We know how to put on big sporting events well. But over the next 6 months, leading up to June 15th, that first game, there's a lot that still needs to happen to really ensure that Atlanta can welcome all of these international visitors with open arms. I mean, to have the hotel space, the business support, the transportation infrastructure ready, rocking and rolling. MARTA, they're going to have new trains on board. By that time, not all new trains, but they'll have maybe 10 or so new trains. That will help. They're going to have a new tap-to-pay fare system. But a lot of these international visitors, they come from cities that have way more robust transit systems. So they may get here and be like, is this it? So there's a little bit that, massaging that the city will have to do in these next 6 months, but they're ready.
Patrick, we're fans of yours. Thank you so much for coming in, Patrick Quinn. We appreciate your insight.
All right. And still ahead on the record, we'll look back at the biggest political stories of 2025.
January marks the start of a busy election year.
And as it starts, Atlanta News First is taking a look back at the headlines that shaped this year in Georgia politics. Take a look.
2025, a year that began in grief across Georgia. Jimmy Carter, the only Georgian to ever become president, was laid to rest, honored with a state funeral at the National Cathedral in Washington.
Jimmy Carter's enduring attribute: character, character, character.
And a solemn ceremony at his spiritual home in Plains.
I imagined the last Sunday when God opened up the doors and said, Jimmy, come on home, that there was an angel with him back, ringing the bell 39 times.
The first piece of legislation signed in President Trump's second term honors a Georgian nursing student who was killed by an undocumented immigrant.
America will never, ever forget Laken Hope Riley.
The Laken Riley Act requires law enforcement to detain and potentially deport undocumented immigrants accused of certain crimes.
Governor Brian Kemp's biggest legislative priority became reality in April when he signed laws overhauling Georgia's civil justice system in an effort to lower insurance costs for small businesses.
Action was desperately needed to stabilize our insurance marketplace and to protect our consumers.
A flashpoint in the fight for reproductive rights in Georgia. Doctors at Emory Hospital keeping Adriana Smith, a pregnant mother who was declared brain dead, on life support for months to preserve the life of her baby.
A protest against immigration raids in DeKalb County leads to the deportation of Mario Guevara. The Spanish-speaking journalist was arrested in Brookhaven and transported to at least 5 different jails before being sent back to his native El Salvador.
A Republican donor accused of running a $100 million Ponzi scheme.
We say, send the money back. It's the right thing to do.
Forcing Republican lawmakers and candidates in Georgia who received donations from First Liberty Building and Loan to return the money.
I was fired for holding the line on scientific integrity.
I resigned because CDC leaders were reduced to rubber stamps, supporting policies not based in science, and putting American lives at risk.
CDC Director Dr. Susan Menares ousted from the Atlanta-based Centers for Disease Control just weeks into her tenure, leading other health experts to resign their roles at the nation's signature health agency.
Hundreds of foreign workers detained at the sprawling Hyundai plant near Savannah, forcing a delay in progress at Georgia's largest economic development project and sparking a push for changes to the U.S. visa program.
The longest government shutdown in U.S. history leads to furloughs, flight delays, and food insecurity for millions across Georgia.
Georgia Democrats flipped 2 seats on the state's hugely influential Public Service Commission. Alicia Johnson ousted Republican incumbent Tim Echols in the special election to represent District 2 on the PSC, while Peter Hubbard defeated GOP incumbent Fitz Johnson in District 3.
Georgia Republican Marjorie Taylor Greene announces her resignation from Congress after her push to release the Epstein files led to a bitter breakup with President Donald Trump.
I love my family way too much And I do not want my sweet district to have to endure a hurtful and hateful primary against me by the president that we all fought for. I refuse to be a battered wife, hoping it all goes away and gets better.
And criminal charges dropped against President Donald Trump in Georgia. The special prosecutor assigned to determine the fate of the historic election meddling case threw out the indictment against President Trump and more than a dozen of his allies.
And that is our show. Thanks to our guests, Dr. Ben Taylor and Patrick Quinn.
And thanks as always to you for watching this special edition of On the Record. And you can join us every Sunday morning at 11 to stay on top of the big developments in Georgia politics impacting you and your family.